I'm live. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome. Happy Friday, or if you're watching this on the replay, whatever date it is for you, happy day to you. Welcome to the live podcast edition of the Mighty Emotions podcast, where we are always talking about our emotions because we understand that how we experience our emotions determines how we experience our lives. I'm your host, Giselle, an emotional resilience coach, and I teach empathic adults how to master their emotions, become more resilient, and assert themselves in their personal relationships with confidence. So a bit of background on me. I'm a certified coach practitioner with the Canadian Coaches Federation. I have a certification in psychological first aid from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and I hold a specialization in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. So a lot of schooling on emotions there. But on a personal level, I have a long history of trauma, and I've always been very sensitive and intuitive, but never had emotional support. I felt my emotions very strongly, as a lot of you can relate to. But I ended up coping with them in the worst of ways. So for the last 7 years, I have been working on my recovery, and I have dedicated my life to intimately get to understand my emotions, right? And so my mission is to help more people feel emotionally safe and self-confident. So before getting into the episode, I want to mention my upcoming free webinar on emotional maturity. So if you are somebody who is empathic, who feels your emotions very strongly, and you tend to shut down or suppress those emotions, you feel like maybe nobody in your life understands you or listens to you or can handle your emotions, this free webinar is really going to be beneficial for you. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, the link is in my bio. It's going to be March 16th at 6 p.m. Sign up at the link in my bio, and I look forward to seeing you there. All right, let's get into today's topic. I wanted to talk today about something that I think is really important, and that is having the internal tools to respond to our emotions in a healthy way. To me, this comes down to two things, right? One, understanding our emotions in an empowering way, and having a core belief that we are safe to feel our emotions. There are many reasons why this might not be true for us right now, but in my work, we focus on where we are today and where we want to go in our life, and not so much on the past. Understanding the past is really important, but we can get stuck there, and it's not entirely necessary for the work that we do. So what is necessary is that we have a toolkit of resources today and moving into the future to draw from when challenging emotions come up. So when it comes to emotional management, a lot of emphasis tends to be placed on the tangible external resources that are very useful, right? Like fitness, meditation, support from others to listen to us and validate us. All very, very important external tools, but we don't always have access to these tools when our emotions come up in the moment. And the sun is just hitting your girl right here, so I hope you can see me. We don't always have access to these resources right in the moment. Internal tools are the intangible resources we have at our disposal at all times. So this might look like having a mantra or an affirmation that gives us comfort, a certain prayer that we say, a spiritual connection to nature or to a loved one that's passed on, and definitely certain knowledge of how to do something. That's a very important internal tool. So think of it like learning to do math from memory, like learning how to, figure out a math equation without a calculator. That internal knowledge of how to do that is very useful, because if you go somewhere and you don't have a calculator, you can still do the equation. Or being able to read the hands of a clock. Instead of having to rely on a digital clock, you can read the hands of, a regular clock. And that is just the internal knowledge that you carry with you that you can use at any time. So that's what I mean by a certain knowledge of how to do something. When we know how to do something, when we have this internal knowledge, we can feel prepared, we can feel empowered, and we're less likely to get panicked, right, when we're triggered or when we're stressed. And we are going to be triggered and stressed. We are. We're not going to avoid that. And so it's a much better use of our energy to prepare for when this happens. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, right? It's not about identifying the triggers or focusing on that. My work is about identifying your emotions, because regardless of what the trigger is, regardless of what the stress is, there are emotions that are going to come up that you're going to have to cope with, that we're all going to have to cope with. And so learning how to respond to that is really, really important. And so like I said earlier, it starts with understanding our emotions in an empowering way, right? There are different ways of looking at our emotions. Everyone has a different viewpoint of them. But is it empowering or is it disempowering? So here are a few disempowering beliefs that we're taught about our emotions. One, we're taught that some emotions are positive and some are negative, right? That's not empowering. Like negative emotions, we want to push those away. We're taught that we have to take action in response to them. We have to do something about them, right? We don't want them disrupting our lives, so we have to do something about them. That's a disempowering. You might think, well, taking action, doing something, but is it something that we control or not, right? So that's something that's disempowering. Another disempowering belief that we're taught is that they're outdated survival mechanisms, that we only have them because once upon a time we had to run from saber-toothed tigers, and we don't need to protect ourselves from saber-toothed tigers anymore, so we can just thank our emotions and push them aside. Why do I consider these beliefs disempowering? Because it's a bit like describing them like liabilities. It's like they're hindrances. They put us at a disadvantage. That's disempowering to me, and that's not how I teach about emotions. I believe emotions are the most accurate internal tools that we as humans have at our disposal. I believe that our emotions orient us in our life, right? So the way I define emotions is that they are notifications from our subconscious mind that let us know when something is not in alignment. So either we have unmet needs, and or we have external circumstances that conflict with our internal beliefs. So what do I mean by notifications from our subconscious mind? Think of it like hunger. Hunger is a notification from your body telling you that it's time to eat. Being tired is a notification or a signal from your body that you need to rest, right? So our emotions are signals as well. And I truly believe that they are so useful, that they are assets to us, right? And that they're still relevant and important, even though we aren't running from saber-toothed tigers anymore. But they're always accurate based on our internal beliefs, what we believe to be true. Not necessarily what is reality, right? But what we believe to be true. And a lot of our beliefs are not aligned with reality. But we'll talk about that in next week's episode. So what does this have to do with an internal toolkit? Well, when we believe that our emotions are liabilities, it's going to affect how we respond when they show up, right? No one wants to deal with a liability. And when we have a core belief that we aren't capable of handling our emotions because maybe we never learned, we were never afforded the space, whatever the reason may be, it's always going to cause us to reach for these protective behaviors that actually hinder our emotional development, right? And so I'll talk about that a lot in my upcoming webinar as well. But I want you to think about your emotions as assets. I want you to think of them as notifications from your subconscious mind that something is out of alignment. And rather than focusing on doing something about the emotion itself, to focus on addressing what's out of alignment, right? So how I explain this or describe this, I don't know if anyone has a Tamagotchi. They had a Tamagotchi, I should say. Are they still around? I'm not sure. But the Tamagotchi, for anyone who doesn't know, is like an egg-shaped toy, like a Japanese egg-shaped toy. And you have a little pet in it, and it has a couple buttons. It's very simple. And whenever the pet needs to eat or drink or sleep, you get a little notification like, hey, feed your pet. And if you don't feed it, it dies. Like, its survival depends on you tending to it, right? And so I think about our emotions like that ping, that notification that, hey, you need to look at, your survival depends on you looking at whether or not there's an unmet need here, right? And when our needs are not being met and we're out of alignment, we're going to have what people refer to as negative emotions. And discomfort is what gets our attention. That's why these emotions don't feel good, because they need to get our attention so that we can get our needs met, right? Like, have you ever been angry when you haven't eaten, right? I have. I get hangry a lot. Like, anger will show up because food is one of our basic physiological needs. And so when we aren't having these needs met, these emotions are going to come up to trigger and to ping and to let us know that we have to address this. But we have higher needs as well as human beings. And I see these higher needs being dismissed all the time. And then we end up confused about why we don't feel great, right? What are our higher needs? What do I mean by higher needs? Love is a higher need. Safety, certainty, like being certain about something, feeling in control. That is a need. Connection, like to a spiritual, being, a higher power, God, whatever it might be. Friendship is a higher need. Relationships with others. Feeling like we're good at something is a need, right? When we don't feel like we're good at something, we feel terrible. That need is missing. Like self-actualization, feeling in flow, feeling in alignment is a need. It's a human need. It's one of our higher needs. So I encourage you to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a better understanding of what some of our higher needs are, and just recognize, which of these needs do you feel currently aren't being met in your life? Because that might explain the discomfort and the emotions that are showing up. And the thing about needs is that when our needs are not met in healthy ways, our subconscious, which drives all of our behavior, seeks to meet them by whatever means necessary. And it's usually in not so healthy ways. So this is why we find ourselves people-pleasing to try to get our need of love and affection met. Or we become very paranoid and controlling, trying to get our need for safety met, right? Or we become depressed when we feel like we're not good at anything because we're not meeting that need of self-actualization. So knowing what our needs are and knowing the different ways that these needs can get met that are healthy is important. And we're better served by knowing this, right? Our emotions might also be notifying us that our beliefs are kind of outdated, for lack of a better term. I'll talk about this more next week, but for now, I want you to become aware of your core beliefs, because our core beliefs are what drives our perception of the world. Our core beliefs is how we feel certain within ourselves, how we make sense of our world. But the thing about them is that they're not always aligned with reality, right? Reality isn't typically black or white. It's often very nuanced. And our beliefs that we hold on to tend to be very rigid, very polarizing, right? So if you are trying to decipher, okay, what are my core beliefs? When you have an uncomfortable feeling, I want you to ask yourself, what has to be true for me to be feeling this way? And that question is going to lead you to what you're believing is true. And then once you can look at that belief, you can ask yourself, is it black and white? Is it all or nothing, right? Or is there nuance in my perspective? Am I having really polarizing thoughts and beliefs? And we're all guilty of this. Our brains are binary and we like to simplify and make sense of things. But our emotions are going to let us know when these beliefs aren't in alignment with reality. And like I said, reality is fluid, it's nuanced, there's many perspectives. We can either look at wide lens or we can look at a really narrow lens. And typically when we're looking from a really narrow lens is when we're not feeling great, right? Our emotions are letting us know that there's stuff outside the picture that we're not seeing and we're not taking into consideration, and it's causing us emotional pain. Like we can choose to see life as either or both and, right? And when we're always in emotional pain, our needs are chronically unmet, our reality doesn't match our beliefs, we're not living our life fully, at this fullest expression of who we are. An example of this is outrage as an emotion. For a long time, I lived with a lot of outrage, so I know this very, very intimately. And typically, what's underneath outrage is actually fear and sadness, right? Not being seen or heard about an issue, being victimized. Early in my life, I felt like nobody cared and nobody helped me and nobody did anything to the people that hurt me. And this left me outraged for a really long time, right? That need for someone to validate my feelings is valid, right? That need for someone to hear my pain and believe me and support me is valid, right? And I believed that something was wrong, and because it was wrong on my terms, that it shouldn't exist. But what was the reality? The reality was that it did exist, right? And instead of accepting that it existed, and instead of accepting that it was happening, and that I don't get to decide what exists or what doesn't, that outrage was there, in my face, letting me know. And my perspective was like super narrow, and I wasn't holding the nuance of life, and I was in a lot of emotional pain, and I know how exhausting it is to live this way, right? So today I tried to live in the both and more so, which is difficult. Like I said, our brains are binary, But when we see these as opportunities to shift our beliefs, when this emotional pain comes up and we can ask ourselves, what am I believing right now? And we can start to try to poke holes in that belief and look at the nuance, right? Eventually, the emotional pain subsides, right? We get back into life on life's terms, as they say in the recovery circles, right? I had to learn to see the humanity in people that hurt me, right? I had to learn to see things as karma, karma's going to get them. That was just what I chose to believe to get me through there. Our beliefs are just thoughts that we choose to be certain about. But I'll get into that next week more. I have learned that I can disagree with something, but it still gets to exist, and I have to focus what's inside my realm of control, which is, again, a need. Feeling safe, feeling certain, feeling in control is a human need. And when we don't have that, our emotions are going to let us know. So to recap, having an understanding that our emotions are useful and that they serve us in an empowering way is a belief that we want to have in our internal toolkits, right? We want to see them as assets because then we experience them as good even when we feel bad. The notifications from our subconscious, they're something's out of alignment, and instead of focusing on the emotion, we focus on what's out of alignment, and that's what's in our control. They get our attention by making us uncomfortable sometimes, but that doesn't mean that they're negative or bad, right? It's almost like I say to myself, it's good that I'm feeling bad because it lets me know something's up, and that's something that I can do something about. And understanding what our needs are and recognizing what healthy options are available to us to get those needs met. How do we get our need for love met? How do we get our need for acceptance met? How do we get our need for validation met? All of that's really important. And finally, understanding that if there's a strong feeling, there is a strong belief that we're holding on to, and that belief conflicts with our reality. And what do you think is easier to change, reality or a belief? I'll let you ponder that, but we're going to talk about that next week. I cannot wait. For anyone joining now, you're going to have to catch the replay, but I hope that this was helpful. When you get a chance to watch it, let me know what stood out for you, what resonated the most with you. Feel free to send me any questions you may have, anything that you're confused about. I will absolutely be answering your questions. And if you haven't already, go to the link in my bio to register for my free webinar on understanding emotional maturity. I will be diving even deeper into what we talked about today, and I'll be sharing how we can become more emotionally mature. It's never too late to develop our emotional intelligence. It's never too late to develop healthy coping skills. So everyone who registers will also get a link to book free coaching sessions with me. It's only going to go out to people on my mailing list. At this time, I'm not posting it on social media. So even if you're not interested in the webinar, which I really encourage you to attend. But even if you're not interested in that, if you're looking to get in touch with me for a personalized one-on-one free coaching session, then registering for the webinar is your way to do that. And so with that, I love you for listening. Let me know your thoughts, like I said, and I will see you next week for our topic, the subconscious solution. We're going to be diving even more into beliefs, and I'm really excited for that. So have a good weekend. Bye.